I made this simple automatic cherry leaf farm that you can AFK to get infinite amounts of these really cool leaves. Besides those, it also produces the cherry logs, saplings, as well as sticks. Hello there, Ray here, and I'm trying to make automatic farm for every item in the game of Minecraft. And getting infinite amount of leaves while being automatic is quite a challenge. You guys might recognize this design as a combination of my automatic cherry tree farm with the leaf collection of my AFK azalea leaf farm. But when the cherry tree grows, it's a bit more complicated. So the main task that we have is that we need the player to plant the sapling as well as also harvest the leaves. So harvesting the leaves means that we have to use the left click. So we're using the tool, the hoe. But in order to plant, we need to use the right click, which is the place option. Because you can't use tools when they're in your offhand, we'll put the tool in the main hand and put the saplings in the offhand. But then I had to figure out how I can use the offhand and right click placing the sapling without using the hoe's right click option, which would till the soil. So I can't aim directly at the soil. So instead, the next option is to have the player click up against a block in order to place the sapling in. This will place it in the available location right beside it. But I still want the player to be able to hold right click and left click at the same time. And then when we would click on this block, the player would just end up trying to break the block rather than place the sapling in. This is because whenever the player is holding down two buttons like right click and left click for breaking and placing, whenever the player comes in contact with the block, the game's either going to try to use the right click or the left click. And whichever one it gets started doing, in this case we're using the right click, it will continue that action until it's complete. But if the game decides to use the left click, in this case it can't use the left click because it can't place a sapling in midair, it will then default back to the right click, which is breaking. So if I come in and try to place this sapling while holding right click and left click, once my player starts to break the block in the background, I'll never be able to place in the sapling. But because every time the player comes in contact with the block, the game either has to choose right click or left click, all I have to do is move the player away and try again. And then there's a 50-50 chance that it will decide to end up planting the sapling. This is a method I originally came up with years ago and still use it to this day in a lot of my farms. And it's done by using this flickering trapdoor. So what we do is we have the player aim up here, and then every time the trapdoor flicks open, the player will then have an option to try to plant the sapling on the side of it, in which case it would place it on the next available block, which is over here on top of the dirt block. But this trick only works if there is air block behind the block you're trying to click on, because you need air block in order to have the game switch out whatever mouse button you're trying to hold down. So because of that, we have the player actually sit kind of far away from the trapdoor. And the player is actually going to sit over here and is going to aim on the side of the trapdoor. And when the trapdoor goes down, the player is going to aim beyond it, but isn't able to actually click on the block in the background. So it's just as if the player is trying to click on some air. But we can't just have the player sitting here stationary, because we also need the player to move up here to actually destroy these leaves with their silk touch hoe in order to get them as items. We can't move the leaves down to the player to be broken, so we're gonna have to move the player to the leaves. So the way I did this was using a minecart here. The player is actually riding in the minecart. Then the trapdoor will drop the player and minecart onto the rails, and then sent up to the top with their hoe in hand and start demolishing the leaves. But we can't just have the player aiming any which direction. We need the player to actually be aiming mostly forward. That way they can destroy the most leaves as possible while inside the minecart. So when you're in survival, you can't reach as far as creative, but you can break the block that is inside of your head. You can also break this one, third one, a fourth one, a fifth one, but not anything further. So we had the player facing mostly forward, but we can't be perfectly forward, because in this situation over here, where we're trying to place in the sapling, we need to aim a little bit off to the side so we can be able to click on the side of this trapdoor and not on the edge of it. We also have to make sure not to click on the trapdoor when it's on the down position, and only click on it when it's in the up position. So the player has to be aimed a little bit upwards as well. Because we have to try to meet all these criteria, it can be difficult to actually position the player, so it works perfectly down here as well as up here. And the way to overcome this problem is to line the player using this wall here. So when they come through, they're going to be boosted with some power rails, and then they're going to be pushed up over this rail here and shot all the way up against this wall right here. So they are perfectly aligned so they can aim in the exact location every time for the perfect placement as well as the perfect leave removal. Getting the player to aim perfectly with the yaw and pitch can be a little bit difficult. So the way you want to do it is turn off the entire system, as the minecart will continue to constantly go in a loop. We do this just by turning off this power source here, and then just remove the minecart and replace it in the center like so, and then turn that back on. And then what we'll want to do is get these yaw and pitch to be the same. First, you hop in the minecart, then we're going to turn on our F3, and right here is our yaw and pitch. And then depending on which direction you face, the numbers might be off or might be negative. I recommend building the farm in the same direction as I have it here. And then you just need to rotate until your yaw is close as possible to 102.5, which can be very difficult if you have a very sensitive mouse. So you can turn down your mouse sensitivities. In your settings here, you can turn the sensitivity to really slow, in which case you can just easily get these numbers. And we want to set the other one to 1. It doesn't have to be perfect, but if you're having trouble, try to get close as numbers possible. We push to the right, we hold down right click as well as left click, all without moving our mouse around, so we're not changing our pitch or yaw. And once we have those two held down, we're going to press F3 plus T. When this comes up, we're going to release those two mouse buttons, and then we're going to press Alt plus Tab, so we're into a different window. And now we can actually move our mouse without actually interfering with player rotating. At this point, you can go AFK as long as you want until your hoe is about to break. And the player is also wearing an Aqua Affinity helmet, so they can actually mine just as fast underneath the water as if they weren't in water. What we got here is a bunch of rails going back and forth. This will let the player be able to reach as many leaves as possible while also not interrupting the tree's growth. You can also move the items to the center if they fall on top of them. All the leaves are then being collected by this water stream. We got a few different water streams here. One water stream's over here with the iron bars and just moves all the item to this area over here and gets put into this chest. We also have another water stream that pushes items underneath of these endstone stairs here, which gets put into a hopper over here and a chest over here. And there's one area in the center where we can't really easily put in a water stream, so I just put another hopper to collect any items that are from there, which should get put into this chest. When the player also comes over to this end here, the minecart is dropped on top of this detective rail. The detective rail is connected to this torch here, and the torch is powering this hopper. What this does is it prevents items from getting pulled into the hopper, so they just sit here. And this is where the player will restock its saplings. Because every time it plants one, it needs to pick up one. So you'll see the player actually pick up a sapling here. And then afterwards, he will activate the detector rail, which will turn off the torch, allow all the extra items to get stored away. After that occurs, the player is then dropped into some water. This is just used for delay, so the player is not standing over near the center farm when the tree is being removed with TNT. Then the player is then moved over top of this detector rail here, which activates a redstone signal, and after a delay, it comes over here and does some redstone stuff. The main thing for the delay is to give the player time to actually plant in the sapling, because every time the trapdoor flickers open and close, there's about a 50% chance the player is trying to use right click versus left click. So we want to give the player a couple different chances. After about 4 attempts, there's about a 100% chance that the player will place in the sapling. This also gives time for the dispenser to bone mill up that sapling to turn it into a tree. After it's bone mill it, you can see it gets pushed upwards. That way we have a new free empty space here to plant in a new sapling next time. That's because the TNT that blows up the rest of the tree doesn't come down low enough to destroy the lower stump. And we don't want the TNT to actually get too close because we do have this dirt here, which could easily get destroyed. The way we push this up is after redstone goes through that delay, it comes over here, and we'll power this piston here, which will go into a little bit more delay, and we'll activate the piston, which is pushing up the dirt block, and then we'll pull it back down again. The same signal will also be used to drop the player downwards. It gets piped over here and up to this trapdoor and over to this observer, which then will flicker this trapdoor. With a quick pulse, the player is then dropped downwards onto the power rails, which sends them all the way up to the very top to start mining the tree from the top down. The reason why I go from the top downwards is that way any leaves that are stuck on top of previous leaves are then removed and they're also dropped as well. We do have a couple iron bars here, which just prevents the tree from putting in logs here, which could eventually suffocate the player and kill them. The water log rails also make the player move slowly, as when you're inside of a minecart mining, you mine at half the speed you normally would. This is also why the hoe has efficiency, to make it so you can easily mine the leaves despite being inside of a minecart. We also have unbreaking to make it last longer, silk touch of course to get the items, as well as mending so you can easily repair it. And with the netherite hoe with unbreaking on it, you should be able to mine up around 8,000 leaves before having to repair it. Activating this detector rail here will also come over and activate this redstone line here, which goes into this monostable, which will go over and activate the scaffolding here, which we're using as a redstone signal to activate some redstone up here. This is where we have our TNT that is actually destroying the tree. Because the cherry trees are quite large, we have to use 4 sets of different TNT activating at different times and at different areas. So we dropped one TNT over here, then we drop another TNT on the opposite side, low down. Then we drop a third a little bit higher up, and a fourth a little bit higher up on the opposite side. This destroys the majority of the tree, so the tree just doesn't go to waste, and you can actually get some logs as well as the leaves, as well as the saplings and sticks. In this setup here, I have 4 TNT dupers and when they activate, they purposely move the TNT towards the center of the tree as close as possible. Then we drop them through some powder slow to slow them down. That way they blow up at the precise location to do the most damage. But we don't want the damage to actually hurt the player, and that's why the player is actually being stalled here in the water while the TNT is going off over there. The only other redstone in this entire machine is for this dispenser here, which is run by this comparator clock. It can actually be turned off if you put in a piston and lever here, so you can turn it off if you don't want it constantly running. And there is a second observer clock which goes to the trapdoor here, which flickers it on and off. If you want to, you could have it hooked to a slower clock, so it's not so annoying. So in order for the farm to run, it does use a bone mill with the dispenser here. You could put the bone mill directly in the dispenser or like in a storage chest, or you could directly hook this up to a bone mill source. I got a whole bunch of them in this playlist here, and I would recommend my easy moss one, which you can easily tile and put in your spawn chunks where it can run 24/7 on servers. It's also a great way to get XPs as well as fuel. Now the other thing the farm takes is TNT. In this design here, I have TNT dupers, so TNT is infinite. But if you're on a server which doesn't allow TNT duping, then I also have a dispenser version which works the same way. I'll provide both these designs in the world download as well as their schematics in the description. Now the thing it also takes is durability off of the hoe, so eventually you'll want to repair it. Other than that, the player doesn't actually take any damage because they're not breaking any blocks that aren't instamine. When they instamine the leaves, it doesn't actually affect them, and them placing in the sapling also doesn't remove any hunger. And because the player doesn't also take any damage from the TNT, we don't need any method for the player to like eat food or regen health, which helps keep this design overall very simple for what it can do. And what you can expect from this farm after running it for 1 hour on average, you get over 2,100 cherry leaves, which are great for decoration. But as a bonus, you get 800 logs, which gets you all the different types of cherry plank variations. 380 extra cherry saplings, which you can also use for decoration or fuel, and 270 sticks, which you can use for crafting or fuel as well. Now see how I design an automatic farm for every other item in the game of Minecraft with this playlist here, or this one about crazy glitches in the game of Minecraft. And don't forget to share this farm with your favorite Minecrafters, letting them know that they can get tons of the cherry blossom leaves. And make sure to credit Ray's works, as I put tons of hours into all my farms. If you're able to support me, check out my Patreon. Otherwise, leave a like on the video, and I will see you in the next one. Bye bye!